guys, welcome in! Today, we're going to be doing something a little bit different, actually. We're going to be reacting, not really reacting, but more discussing the honkaistarrail 3.2 story that I just finished last night. I enjoyed it quite a bit, but there are also a lot of things about it that I just wanted to talk about and discuss, because while I think the story was very, very good, I think there are also a lot of things in the patch, or in the story, regarding the story in particular, that I just wanted to discuss with y'all. So yeah, trying out something new. In the beginning of the year, I told you guys I wanted to do some story reviews rather than just reactions, and I know it's been a few months already, but hey, better late than never, okay? So we're starting with Starrail 3.2, and yeah. So on the screen overall here, I have a little notepad here of the overall things I guess I wanted to kind of talk about. So we'll just go down the list in order and have some chats, I guess. Story overall, firstly, my impressions of the story. I personally, Starrail 3.2, I quite like the story. There was so many lore drops. There was so many like plot things that were really, really cool and really amazing. And then the high moments of the story, I think were very, very epic and pretty lit. But at the same time, I do think that there also were a lot of parts of the overall story experience in 3.2 that were maybe not so exciting and not so well done. And that pertains both with regards to the plot and the way that they presented the plot, and also the actual like physical in-game experience and presentation of said story. So yeah, we'll go through all of those different things together, but those are my overall impressions, just so you guys have like a general overview. I am going into this as someone who enjoyed it, okay? I am someone who did quite enjoy the 3.2 story. Did I enjoy it as much as I enjoyed 3.1? No. Not even close, I would say, for me. 3.1 to me was the best Starrail story patch ever. I mean, thus far in the game. And I think that they did lots of amazing things well, like pacing, progression, plot, and then also like cutscenes, and just it was so well balanced overall. And then the character writing, it was just, I think it was really, really good. I think the 3.2 was able to live up to that in some aspects, but not all of them. So I guess we'll talk about it. So yeah. All right, so first up, we have the story. Okay, so the story I've split into two parts, the plot and the writing, because I do have kind of, yeah, I have a lot of things I want to say. Most of this video will probably be talking about the story and the plot and the writing, because that is, those are the things that I am the most into. But okay, let's start with the plot. Okay, the plot itself, I think, was pretty fantastic. We got so many interesting lore dumps. We got so many interesting storylines and just new information. I think there were a lot of things that they taught us in the 3.2 patch that have been building up for a while in Emporius, and from the past two patches of 3.0 and 3.1 that have kind of culminated into them revealing very, some plot twists and things like that in this particular patch. Castorice's storyline. Let's start with that. Castorice's character arc and storyline, I think, was fantastic. I think her plotline as a whole was amazing. I think the pacing of it was very, very good. And just overall, I think they did a quite good job at building her up and then kind of showing us her character arc, her character development as she experienced and learned about things that we were also learning as we went through Stixia and, learned about like Pollux and all those different the different things pertaining to Thanatos and the demigods and the Chrysos heirs. And I think it really was able to showcase her as a character and give her a lot of depth, and also whilst simultaneously making me have lots of, thoughts about, life and death and the entire concept of what surrounds it. So yeah, I think the overall execution of life and death in 3.2 was very well done, because a lot of the times it's a topic that's brought up very often in a lot of stories, but I think that the way they implemented it here, especially with the idea of reincarnation and I guess like the pain, but also the happiness that comes with life and death, and how life really does shine more when it has a finite end. I think that those are very, very cool things that they brought up, and they did it in a way that wasn't too corny or cheesy either. So yeah, overall for Castorice's storyline in particular, I think was fantastic. I really don't have any complaints about Castorice's plotline whatsoever. Anaxa's storyline. So Anaxa's storyline is kind of like, the way they wrote Anaxa was very fun. I actually enjoy how kind of chaotic he was and how, in a way, ruthless he was with trying to achieve his goals and how morally gray he was as well, because he was honestly pretty morally gray in terms of his attitudes in a lot of respects when it came to trying to find out the truth and prove his hypothesis. So I really like Anaxa as a character. That being said, I think the plot line that Anaxa was involved with, which obviously was connected to Castorice's storyline as well, but his plotline with regards to the Council of Elders and the entire political sphere of Emporius, I personally think that the entire political aspect with the Council of Elders and all of the whole like Penacony people and all of that stuff, I honestly think that was pretty... I did not like it in the sense that I think they did a very poor job at representing what I think they were aiming for. So I do not think Anaxa's storyline / Anaxa with the Council of Elders, I do not think that storyline was very good. I do not think they did a good job at really trying to tell us that story without just dumping lore on us. I enjoyed Anaxa's aura maxing. Yes, Goat Naxa's aura maxing and stuff was very fun, but I do not think that it was very well written, especially with regards to the Council of Elders. I'll go more into detail for that when we get to the writing aspect of it. But yeah, so Anaxa, I like the storyline Anaxa was involved with, not so much. And it was also, I think, quite long-winded because there was quite a bit of repetition in it as well. And I do not think it was as cohesive or as strong as Castorice's. There was the Black Swan lore dump, and then there was also the Lygus and Herda lore dump at the very, very end of the story. I think that those like pieces of information were so mind-blowing. Okay, I'm honestly still kind of reeling from the information we learned when Lygus was talking to Herda. Like, that lore bomb was insane, actually. And I really like it because it has completely kind of like changed my perspective on everything that's going on in Emporius thus far. So I think that was like, that thing in particular was very, very amazing and good. However, it did feel like it was just kind of dumped at the very end. And there wasn't really much build up to it. It was just kind of like a thing that they had to tell us. So then they told it to me and I'm wowed and amazed, but it wasn't like a storyline in particular. It was a kind of build up of a lot of things that are going on in Emporius, but in the ways that they told us in the story, it was just kind of like, and here, by the way, this really like mind-blowing thing is also possibly happening. So yeah, I did like the plot itself there. That would lead me into the writing. So yeah, the writing, I think, was honestly, I wouldn't say it was overall weak, but I think it was definitely very weak in some respects. Once again, kind of, if I'm splitting the patch into Castorice and like Anaxa / Council, I think, once again, Castorice's writing and her entire arc, I think, was pretty well paced. I think that it was very well executed for the most part and felt natural, if I take her part in isolation. Because the patch was kind of split between, like, the first half was a lot of Anaxa and Council, and then the second half was Castorice. I think the first half of the story, they gave us some really cool information. They gave us some really mind-blowing lore with regards to the Chrysos heirs and the demigods and how they actually are the Titans and the whole cycle and everything. I thought that was crazy, okay? That was really, really interesting. And that is something that we learned pretty early on in the patch, I would say. The very beginning, we also learned, obviously, the start of Trailblazer and then her/his death upon our very arrival. I think that was also really cool. However, I do not think that The story pacing did a very good job at building up the Council of Elders and then the overall like political sphere of Emporius whatsoever. What do I mean by that? I feel like at any given point in 3.2, the Council of Elders did not feel like a threat, nor did the people of Emporius and their voting to stop the Flame Chase journey. Yes, I understand objectively that stopping the Flame Chase journey is very bad. Probably not good, especially because that's the main storyline of what's going on. So that we need to complete it to go to the end of the prophecy. So then subsequently, the Council of Elders and the people of Emporius and the entire voting thing did not feel like it really mattered at any given point. It just felt like they were telling me that, oh, this Council of Elders is very scary. Kindness is, she's an assassin. She's killed Chrysos heirs in the past. She's so scary. But to me, as I was playing the story, she just felt like she was just yapping. She was just a Karen. It was literally the Council of Karens, okay? So it was not very scary at all. every time Kindness showed up on the screen, I was like, okay, this loser is about to come talk some shit again. It was not compelling for me. And then they spent so long on Anaxa trying to build up this whole like banter back and forth between Anaxa and the council, and they spent so long trying to build this tension, and then I just did not feel the tension. If they had maybe made the council feel more threatening, and how could they do that? Firstly, they could make their motivations a bit more mysterious, right? They could really make us feel just how important it is for the people of Emporius to support this vote. They could make us feel like the council themselves have power, because as it stands, the council, is just a bunch of people versus these Chrysos heirs that have literal godly powers, okay? So the power scaling between the two of them, the power dynamic is already very leaning towards the Chrysos heirs. So what's one way they could have balanced it a bit? Maybe make the council make us feel the threat from Kefali's power. Because the council has power over Kefali. They own Kefali's core flame, and they are the ones in charge of Kefali's core flame. So maybe one way that they could make it so that the council seems to also have more physical power is make it so that they show us just how the council uses Kefali's core flame power to assassinate previous Chrysos heirs. They mentioned Kindness has assassinated heirs in the past, but we never saw it. They never showed us it. They never showed us the implications. They never showed us the effects that slaughtering these Chrysos heirs would have on the Flame Chase journey and the rest of Emporius, apart from the fact that you just are told that it's bad. At the end of the day, the council was kind of one of the primary antagonists of this patch. So then when you have the primary antagonist that is not really scary or doing anything of value, my opinion, then it does definitely detract from the story they're trying to tell with regards to the patch. Because then it just made Anaxa's entire storyline feel just like a lore dump. And then they did the lore dump at the beginning. So at the very end, like when we got to the final council, with Anaxa doing his thing, revealing the truth to all the people of Emporius, I really didn't. I was pretty disappointed by that scene because I expected there to be another plot twist. And there wasn't. And then it was just like the expected outcome, the very expected outcome that I already kind of had predicted from the very beginning. And I do not think that my prediction was that much of a stretch of logic either. I think it was very obvious what we were supposed to think since the first time they reveals the whole demigod, Chrysos heirs, Titans situation. And again, I really like Anaxa as a character. I think he's very cool. I loved how they wrote his character and how I found him really funny, honestly, and his dynamics with Cersei's were super hilarious as well. But I just don't think that Anaxa really, grew as a character from the first time we met him. Nor do I think that the amount of screen time that he got was justified, because he did not really change as a person. And not every character has to change, not every character has to go through a super big character arc, for sure. But then you don't spend as much time on that character. This whole vote for the people of Emporius, what did that really offer to the overarching story? We know the Flame Chase journey is going to continue regardless of whether or not these people vote or not. And so why does it matter realistically to us as a player what the people of Emporius think? It doesn't really. Sure, you can still make it so that, you can write it on like the side that, oh, maybe the people of Emporius are opposed, you know? They're opposed to the journey, so they're not fully accepting, so then they treat the Chrysos heirs like shit. For sure, I think that is a very interesting and compelling point to make, especially because a lot of heroes, a lot of people who, you know, you consider true heroes do not do it. They don't do it for like recognition. They don't do it for glory. They do it because it's what needs to be done. And I think that is a very recurring theme that we have gotten from a lot of the Chrysos heirs. But like as at this current point in time, it's like, I feel like had they just done away with the entire situation of, oh, the people need to accept the Flame Chase journey, nothing would have changed. And then there was also like a few parts of the story that was just completely unnecessary. Like Hyacinth and Danhong's part, I genuinely forgot Hyacinth showed up in the story because the part was so insignificant with regards to the overarching storyline, and we really didn't learn anything. Because the only thing we learned when we were with Hyacinth was that the Chrysos heirs discovered what Anaxa was doing. But it's like, again, we as a player already knew what Anaxa was doing from the previous few scenes that we had with Anaxa. So yeah, but like, but for the council, like, so I know I have been shitting on the council a lot and been talking about how I do not think that they were very significant, but like things that they did do well with the council, I still think that the council was overarchingly probably unnecessary. But with regards to the ending, I think that, you know, when they were showing the people of Emporius and how ruthless they were and how like willing they were, like, oh my god, execute this guy, or like, you know, like screw the Chrysos heirs, like just how much they really like hated. I hated the Flame Chase journey. I thought that that was pretty compelling, and because I do think a lot of games sometimes will will kind of soften the fact that people dislike others. So then seeing how willing the people of Emporius were to vote for an execution, right? I think that was a really interesting contrast with just how Emporius has been portrayed in its era nova, or sorry, I forgot the exact name of it, but in this peaceful time, right? It's like you have this land of peace, these people who have known peace for so long. Now, ever since, you know, these 3 calamities came, they no longer have that peace. And just how that has completely kind of shifted their mindsets and the, I guess, naivete as well of how the people of Emporius treat the dark tide and all of the danger and suffering and pain that comes with it. So I do think that that was an interesting thing that they did that I also liked. So, you know, it wasn't all bad, but I still think it was with the council. It had a potential. It had so much potential for them to turn the council into this threatening thing and then show us the different sides of the Flame Chase journey and the people who oppose and support it. And I just think that they fell flat with regards to that. So yeah, I wish they either built it up more or just didn't include it at all. I guess, so yeah, let me know about the story and what you guys think about that. So next part is the presentation. I think that the presentation there were lots of highs. There were very good highs in the story. The last 3 hours, I think, were amazing, okay? Especially with the Polixia, Castorice, Thanatos arc. It was so beautiful. But there were also lots of lows. So overall sprite dialogue, I think that they did a good job at adding more camera work to certain scenes when it is like the sprite dialogue, you know, when we're seeing the character. And then on the bottom of the screen, you have the, you know, the text going. Yeah, I do think that they did a good job of that. However, they did not do that for the entire story, okay? They only did that more concentrated near the end, near the latter half of the patch story. If we're looking at the patch as a 7-hour story, only the last 3 hours had that. The first 4 hours was still mostly just static camera with literally no animation, which made it feel a lot more monotonous, on top of the fact that there was a lot of repetition and, you know, the council, the stuff that we just talked about. So it was very inconsistent. So I think that needs to be improved. it needs to be more consistent because it was so beautiful. The ending was so lovely. You know, when you're in the nether realm and then you saw the moon and then you saw the atmosphere with the both of them talking and then you saw these beautiful shots. I literally took so many screenshots. I took so many screenshots at that time because it was so pretty. And then the first half of the story was just text simulator. I feel like the first half of 3.2 was a completely separate story and patch than the second half of 3.2. That's how I would describe it. So yeah, I mean, okay, that leads me into the cutscenes. There were not that many cutscenes. I personally don't need a lot of cutscenes, if I'm being honest. Cutscenes are nice for sure, and I do think stories should strive to add more cutscenes. But that is providing everything else in the story is also high quality. So I do not think that the stuff in 3.2, for the most part, especially the first half, was high quality enough to not have cutscenes. And a few moments that I think they could have done cutscenes is, for example, maybe at the very beginning when we're in with Orynyx. You know, Orynyx is telling us for the first time that Trailblazer is dead. We're dead. We were dead on arrival, guys. We didn't even make it out of the spawn. So maybe if they had a small cutscene with some flashback shots, even if it was just like a slideshow, like CG slideshow of flashes of what happened when we first arrived, I think that would have been a lot more compelling than just telling us that, oh shit, you're dead, and then zooming into Trailblazer's expression like, and then moving on and then doing, you know, the flashbang. That was one of the moments where I do feel like they definitely did not need, they should have replaced that text with not, you know, they should have done something visually. And then another, speaking of the black screen text, another very easy and very quick, I think, black screen text that they could have replaced as well was when we first meet Castorice at the very beginning in the garden, and she walks up to us. There's a black screen text that says, "We hear steps behind us, walking behind us." They could have very easily just showed Castorice walking. They literally showed Castorice walking later on in the story, at the very end. In the Vortex of Genesis, or not at the very end, but when we were seeing the two sisters interacting through their echoes, they showed us footsteps walking. So just do that in the garden. It's the same thing, you know? Again, I don't think they need to remove every single black screen text, but there are definitely ones that they should be, I think, putting a bit more effort into animating. So, but yeah, overall, the cutscenes themselves, the quality of the cutscenes that we did get, though, were very high. Dude, the Castorice, all of the Netherworld cutscenes were insane. Did you see those water physics? That was nuts. Those were so pretty. I think water physics are amazing. And then to see them done well in animation is, you know, that shit would take so long to render, okay? So it looked super cool. I loved it. I loved the cutscenes. I think they were very pretty. But again, the cutscenes are not enough to ignore the parts of the story that were not strong enough without cutscenes. So the only thing I have to say about that is I wish that they posted the animation after this patch came out, because then I would have watched the animation after I finished the story versus watching the animation beforehand and then seeing it in the story. I think, imagine how much impact it would have been. It would have had so much impact if I saw that for the first time at that moment. Yeah, that's a very minor thing. All they have to do is post it a bit later. And I think I did hear someone in chat mention that they did mention they're going to post, not do that in the future. They're not going to post these animations beforehand. They'll post them after. So as long as they do that, then perfect. I love how much it can add to the story if they use more of these animations. While it's a way to break up the story while still keeping all of the content in the story relevant. CGs. There were basically no CGs in this particular patch. I actually went back and looked. I compared the amount of CGs from 3.1 to the amount of CGs we got in 3.2. In 3.2, I think I can list the amount of CGs we got on one hand. There was the Castorice CG at the beginning. There's the Anaxa in the Underworld CG. There's the Anaxa talking to his professor CG. There is the CG at the end with Castorice and Trailblazer. There was the Cypher CG. There were two Cypher CGs. It was like not as much, because when I was scrubbing through my 3.1 VOD, I swear to God, there were like 10 separate instances of CGs. And I think CGs would be actually a very nice way and very easy way, honestly, for the team to break up the story. You know, if we are, one of our complaints is that sometimes we feel like they're talking a bit too much. They have talking heads a bit too much. What's one way that you can prevent those talking heads is you give us a cool CG. I think a very good example would be in the, you know, when we are with Hyacine, and then Hyacine is recreating a story from Anaxa's past with her voice acting. Because don't get me wrong, I know art takes time, okay? I know art takes time and a lot of effort. But if we're talking about the amount of effort it takes to make an animation cutscene versus making a CG, they can definitely put more resources into just, you know, giving their artists some more time to make more CGs that can help elevate the story experience and then also make it less stagnant. The voice acting overall, voice acting was fantastic. I don't really have much to say about the voice acting. Yeah, sucks. I played the English voice, so I was missing Dan Heng and Trailblazer's voices, which does suck. You know, there's the whole like voice actor strike stuff going on. I'm not going to get into that. So yeah, for me, I was sad that I didn't get to hear Dan Heng and Trailblazer, but the voice acting that was in the patch was so good. Like, dude, Polixia and Castorice at the end, and then also Anaxa when he was doing his dramatic stuff too. It was fantastic. Just all of the voice acting was amazing. Not much to say there. Map and puzzles. I personally like the map and puzzles. Again, it was all at the end. There was only really the Stixia part. I think that it was a good enough amount, that it wasn't annoying, it was simple, and didn't take too long. And also exploring the Stixia map was very nice because it was very pretty. I really liked the mechanic that they had with the time and the water disappearing between the two things while it follows us. So yeah, I personally enjoyed the map and puzzle quite a bit, and I did not think it was overwhelming, so I think that it was a very good job. Yeah, mostly I think that the latter half of the patch was fantastic, and then the first half of the patch was just like a different game. Like they were just too, it felt like, if we're not talking about the story itself, the presentation of the first half and the second half they were done by different teams. It's how it felt. So I wish that they would make it more consistent and not do that in the future. If I were to give this patch a rating, I would separate it like story execution and presentation. For me, I would give the story itself, like the actual plot, a 7.5. Again, I think Castorice's plot was perfect. I think the actual lore drops that we got with the whole Chrysos heirs, the demigods, and then the lore drop at the end as well with Herda, Lygus, and Black Swan. I think those things were super interesting. The lore is fantastic. I love it to death. It makes me very excited about the future stories. So yeah, story itself, 7.5. Story execution is for me going to be referring to like the writing and like pacing and how they wrote it. Castorice storyline, I would give the story execution like a 7.5 to 8. The Anaxa / Council storyline, this is going to be very harsh, but I did just finish it last night, so maybe I am still kind of upset and disappointed, and it's very fresh in my head. I would give the Anaxa Council storyline like a 5. Like a 5 or like 5.5, maybe. Yeah, I'd give it like a 5, 5.5. Yeah, overall execution of story, if I like kind of have to like choose an average, would be around like a 6 then. I would give the story execution like a 6. Just because I feel, I really dislike the fact that they kind of, in a sense, spoiled the big reveal of the demigods are the Titans at the beginning. And so then for me, there was no payoff whatsoever in the latter half. I would give the highs of the story a 8.5. 8.5. Like the last half, the Castorice cutscenes, the pacing of her storyline, incorporating the animated short, and then the writing for Castorice's stuff, and then even the animations, okay? Even the animations and actual presentation of the council and Anaxa stuff at the end, we got a bunch of cutscenes there too. That was also really good. The lows are very low. The lows were just, there was like nothing happening. There wasn't that much happening. So I would give the lows probably a 5, I guess. So I guess my overall presentation score would be that averages around to like 7, I guess. See, okay, but I want to give it a lower score. Okay, I'm gonna leave this at 5. I'm gonna leave this at 5, and then I'm gonna make this a 6.5 because frankly, I really dislike the fact that it was so inconsistent. I do not like the fact that the first half was completely different from the second half, and that all of the effort went into the second half. Because that to me just makes it feel like they did not care about the first half whatsoever, which makes me also not care about the story, on top of the fact that I had issues with the story itself. Yeah, I liked that they introduced Cypher. I think Cypher's role was very nice. You know, quick introduction, quick outroduction. So, very cool. Yeah, overall, it might actually be an interesting idea if they were to split the main story into 2 halves and release the first half on the first half of the patch and then the second half on the second half of the patch. So it makes me wonder if maybe break up the story into more digestible pieces so people who don't want to sit through a long amount of hours of content can do it in 2 parts. They could do a first half, second half type beat. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments, because I think that it definitely could work. Consistency is my biggest thing about 3.2. I wish it was more consistent. Guys, I am not someone who played this entire thing in one go either, okay? I spread it out into a few playthroughs, so it wasn't overwhelming for me. And I do not think that me playing it in one go would have changed my opinion on any of this because of how lopsided it felt, so I think it could work. And also Anaxa being dead for people who played story before his banner is kind of diabolical. See, I'm fine if they do that. I'm fine with them killing off characters. I have mentioned many times that I hope that they do actually create some significant stakes where characters are willing to die. I know in Emporius there's the whole rebirth cycle, so it's like he's not going to stay dead, but at least the rebirth cycle and the death in this sense is still better built up than for me in Penacony. Because at the end of the day, the only way for people to revive in Emporius in its given state is for us to complete this cycle. At least in this case, Anaxa dying makes me feel like we are not going to see him until the very end of the journey. Which in that sense, I'm okay with. Because him dying now, we get to feel that emptiness. We get to feel that emptiness. And once again, the whole like memories, people losing their memories, losing who they are, themes that are going on are pretty interesting. And I think significant. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear it. Those are my general thoughts about 3.2 and the story as a whole. Let me know if you agree or disagree with anything in particular. I'm sure there's stuff I missed out or left out as well, because I could talk about this for ages. No pun intended. But yeah, I think I mostly got out like the general ideas I had, and yeah, curious to see how other people thought about it as well, because I did go into this for the most part. I can go into stories enjoying them while I'm playing them, but this time, you know, I was unable to avoid everyone's opinions online. So maybe, you know, seeing the general outlook on 3.2 also did affect my opinion. I'm, you know, just for full clarity, you know, that could be the case. I don't know for sure, but I do think that the thoughts I expressed today are my genuine thoughts at the moment, having played and finished the story last night. So yeah, curious to see what you guys think as well. I tried to be as fair as possible. I tried to, you know, talk about the things I liked, things I didn't like, because I don't think it's, you know, a bad enough story to be written off completely like a lot of people are saying. I don't think it's dog shit. I think the story itself was still pretty interesting, very interesting actually, and quite enjoyable. I just wish that it was more consistent. And I wish that they put more thought into certain decisions that they made when planning out the overarching plotline. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. Hope you guys enjoyed my video. Let me know if you want me to do more kind of reviews like this in the future as well. Again, this is something very new, so still figuring it out myself, but I think it's fun to discuss and talk about these things and express my opinion with y'all. So let me know if you enjoyed it. Let me know if you want me to never speak again. Like, subscribe if you did enjoy, and join the Discord server if you want to come chat and have a good time. And apart from that, thank you so much for watching YouTube. Take care, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye!